guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. I apologize if you hear noise outside, but it's been raining for days on end, seemingly with no pause, so we can call it atmospheric rain or something that makes it sound better because it's been really annoying. Today I wanted to talk about daddy issues, or what people refer to as daddy issues. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know a bit of my background or history with my father, blah blah blah, but I do think that it's an issue that gets undermined a lot. Like, people will be like, oh, you just have daddy issues, and use it kind of in a belittling, insulting way, when the reality of it is, you know, we're conditioned to grow up with two parents, or like that's what we're socialized like, right? When one of those parents leaves, it can and likely will fuck you up. And then that's called daddy issues. Now, obviously not everyone who uses the term daddy issues is using it in an offensive way. Like, when I use it, it's just literally what it is. But there are some people who kind of use it to belittle someone when they're arguing on Twitter or something. All the worst things happen on Twitter. I slept very badly, so if I sound weird, it's because I'm very tired. My whole story with that is complicated, yet very stereotypical. So my father stopped being faithful at a certain point and basically kept being unfaithful until I was less than a year old. So I don't know when all of that started, but he was unfaithful when I was 6 months old already. It was someone he worked with. If you know stereotypes, I'm pretty sure you can guess. Basically, he did the most cowardly thing I can imagine anyone doing, which is also stereotypical. In the summer, my grandpa has a country house. We would go there in the summers for a month or two, and this was a tradition I held long after this. I think for almost 20 years we did that. We went to the country house, and in the week he would go back to Germany, because at the time that's where I lived, but the country house was in Italy. In the week, he'd go back to Germany for work and then come back on the weekends. Anytime I say this out loud, it actually astonishes me how fucked up it is. One weekend ended, we were at the summer house, he was gonna go back to Germany, and he just went without saying anything, without having the conversation of this marriage is over, I want out, whatever. It's pretty much like going out to get the pack of cigarettes and not coming back stereotype, but this was with his work. So he basically acted like everything was fine and just never came back and just went MIA. To the point where my family started worrying whether he was dead, because he wasn't answering phone calls. Nobody knew anything because there was, like I said, no conversation had. So he just pretty much pieced out, and we didn't know if he'd gone missing or whatever. Now, I was 6 months old at this point, so I had no idea what was going on. They probably wouldn't have told me even if I could understand what was going on and was older. What occurred is that another family member of mine, and my family's very, very small. I have no cousins. I'm an only child. So another family member of mine who was close to my father actually flew to Germany to go look for him because, like I said, he never said anything. And it turns out that that was just his way to end a marriage. I honestly, to this day, don't know. Since then, he came in and out of my life kind of as he pleased. Like, he'd maybe visit once a year, and that was until I turned 6. So I'd see him about once a year until I turned 6, and I still did not really know what was going on because, like, your concept of time, at least mine when I was 6, was not as it is now. So him being gone for a very long time in my head was always accounted for as, oh, he's on a work trip or something. So I never became suspicious, but that's also because he never was around in the first place. So I had no basis of knowing, oh, this is weird, this is longer, he's usually here, whatever. And then I turned 7, and he went entirely MIA. I don't have confirmation for the reason, but I do have my theories. Now, I was a nerd as a child, okay? So we had a computer room because this was the 90s and early 2000s. And my mom had a kind of like briefcase type thing that she wasn't using. So I was like, oh, can I use this to play and pretend I'm going to the office? That was like fun for me, apparently. And she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I end up opening the briefcase, and I find a letter that was saying that basically my father had had another child with the woman he was unfaithful with. He had been fired from the company, so he and the woman he was unfaithful with, which I believe was his secretary, if I recall correctly, got married and had a kid. So I have a stepbrother just walking around that has no idea I exist, which is real cool. That doesn't count as seeing him, but that's basically the last I saw of him, if you can count the letter as some kind of interaction. Letter that wasn't even for me. And ironically, that was the year that I had bought, you know, those like fake Oscar trophies? I'd gotten him one that said Best Dad, which the irony of it all, because I didn't even have an address to send it to because he was MIA by then. So from the ages of 6/7 to 22, no idea where he was, didn't even know if he was alive, didn't know where he lived, nothing. Now it's important to note that in all of this, my aunt, we had two lawyers. He had his lawyer, my aunt is our lawyer, so there was always communication because my aunt never moved in all of those years. So he still had the same phone number. He still had the address. The other lawyer still had the phone number and address. So our side was very much open, but his side was not as much. So like there was always a way for him to contact us, but not necessarily the other way around, which became an issue because of the laws of certain countries, and I don't even know if they still work this way. I remember when we moved to China, I wasn't 18 yet when we moved, and he had to like sign a piece of paper basically approving that I was going to be leaving the European Union. Again, never reached out even when he knew I was going to leave. My family is very special in the way that they didn't vilify him. My mom never vilified him. I don't know why, because he's genuinely just like a terrible person in my opinion, and we'll get into that. But they were very good at the kind of thing where it's like, hey, if you want to have a relationship with this person, we can try to get you in contact if he's not just like pretending you don't exist. And I was still relatively close with my grandpa and grandma on his side around until I was 13 and 14, and then my grandpa died and nobody told me until a year later. And that's because my mom and my side did not know, and the German side just didn't deem it important enough to tell me, I suppose. I don't know, truly. To this day, don't know if that grandma is still alive, what the deal is, nothing. Cut to when I'm 22. Now, when I was 22, when he contacted me, he did it at a very particular time. Because of the laws at the time, and I don't know if they're German laws or Italian laws, like I said, my family doesn't really talk about this much, but because of that, a parent needs to provide for the child until they're either married or finish university, which I think is an incentive to get kids to go to university and continue with their studies. The amount my father was supposed to pay, just to give you a ballpark figure, would not cover books for a semester. So like I'm not going to say it was useless because money is money, but at the same time, it was like if my mom weren't a working mother, it would not cover anything because it genuinely would only cover books for a semester, because you guys also know how expensive college books are. That being said, he went for, I think, a decade without paying anything. So like that shows you how life-changing the money was. It was just kind of like a lost cause. So I don't know what happened with the lawyers. And the thing is, like the money aspect of it to me wasn't about how much you're paying as much as it's like the principle of being like, hey, you still are my child. I still want to help you with books or whatever. And he didn't even care to do that. So the principle of the money. The plan was actually that he was going to be a stay-at-home dad and my mom would go to work because financially it all worked out. So I would have time with a parent as opposed to time with babysitters, which I ended up having many, many, many babysitters. So when I was 22, he reached out via Facebook. I'm sorry, I just find it so funny. It's like, hey, been MIA for like 15 years, but what's up? He basically tried to act like nothing happened, which was a very strange experience because how do you do that? like, you have no idea who I am, like, who I am. You don't know my favorite color. Like, you don't even know the basics about me, and you're gonna start talking to me like we're good, like you saw me last week. Naively, I decided to give it a chance because I had been going to therapy for depression and other things, but a big part was abandonment issues and trust issues due to the fact that my father just like didn't give a fuck. And through that therapy, I just learned you can't make anyone love you, which is devastating, I think, in whatever situation you are in, especially if it's a parent and especially if it matters to you. You can't make someone love you. And I think for a really long time, that was hard for me to understand because I think that deep down, I still wanted him to value me. I wanted him to impress him. I wanted to, basic child shit that you want to do to make your parents proud of you. Until relatively recently, in the past few years, that's when I just kind of pulled the plug and said, okay, this is not going to go where I want it to go. And where I wanted it to go was just for us to be civil and be able to have some kind of relationship, even if it was weird. So I started talking to him when I was 22, and we would do Skype calls and just kind of try to get to know each other and just talk about shit. I tried multiple times to get him to take accountability for being a coward, basically. But I obviously I didn't say it like that to him, but I was like, you need to address this because we cannot move forward with whatever relationship this is, whether we're just acquaintances or friendly or whatever, until you address that you were a forest fire for our family. We're not moving on until you address that you had your fuck ups. He would always find a way to skirt around that or find a way to make it somebody else's fault. And sure, there are plenty of moving parts, but you can't just abstain from all responsibility. Like, you went away, you didn't tell anyone, never tried to contact me, did not care if I was alive or dead. And I tried multiple times to get him to at least just say he was even sorry, but he wouldn't and didn't to this day. You guys might know my favorite 2 holidays of the year are Halloween and New Year. New Year rolls around, and remember that law I told you about, that if you've finished school or if you're married, the one parent who's paying child support doesn't have to pay anymore? He contacted me right when I was married because he wouldn't know if I had finished school because he didn't know anything about me. But on Facebook, there were pictures of my wedding. And I deleted that Facebook forever ago. So it's interesting that that's when he contacts me, right? Just when you can kind of pull the plug on any kind of financing, which frankly, like I said, I didn't even really care about the money. It was more just like the principle of showing some type of care for you that they're like, I want to provide for books or whatever the fuck. On New Year's Eve, he wanted to do a Skype call, which I thought, oh, that's cool. Like, we can do a call before it's midnight for me because I was in Vegas at the time. I thought it was like a gesture, the dumb bitch juice. I thought it was a gesture. So we start talking just like normal. And mind you, the whole money child support thing is not something anyone ever talked to me about. Not my mother, not my aunt who's our lawyer. It always went between the lawyers. And I'm sure my mother knew, but it's like, you're not going to tell a kid that because I'm not in control of it and it's none of my business. What she did was put all that money aside for me. So this was a very uncomfortable conversation because he had told me that basically, I can't remember if I think he was laid off or he left his job. And this was way before the pandemic. So something had occurred at his job. And that he was looking for another job. And so there was like a financial strain. I was understanding and I was sorry about that. But he used this whole time before, in my opinion, my conspiracy allegedly, to kind of work up to the point of asking to not contribute anymore. As far as my knowledge about all this, I didn't even know if he was still paying, had paid for the last decade. Like, I did not check for him in any way whatsoever. So when he asked me, I was kind of put in an awkward position because I didn't know what the situation was. And like I said, this goes between lawyers. My consent, you can ask for it, but it's like, you can't just ask me out of nowhere, knowing full well that I have no idea how much you pay, when you pay, via what, wire transfer, PayPal. I know nothing about this. So he kind of I think, tried to emotionally manipulate me into thinking he was interested in coming back into my life, when the reality is that he was too cowardly to ask my own lawyer, my aunt. So he went through me because he knew that with me it would be harder for me to say no. Like, if you're struggling financially, of course I'm not going to ask you for anything. And this happened on New Year's Eve, so like I remember hanging up the call and just telling my best friend about it. And I hadn't even realized what had occurred until I said it out loud to her, where I was like, oh, for I think at least a year, he was trying to reconnect with his daughter, but actually he contacted me right after I got married. He was working up the courage, basically, courage I use loosely, to stop paying. And like I said, it's not about the money as much as it's like, after that, he could be entirely away from me. No contact, no legal repercussions, nothing. So I think he wanted a blank slate, let's say. So I didn't really give him another chance as much as I told him, hey, you know, like, this whole situation is making me reevaluate your intentions. And then I was like, I need time to think about whether, and I use this analogy a lot, I think also because of therapy, that I needed to have the door with him either opened or closed, but here it was like a creak. And it's like, I need the closure of either we're in some type of father-daughter relationship and there's an open communication, or the door is closed and then we're done. You are dead to me, basically, which is a very difficult decision to make when you are both extremely angry with this person, but also have this urge to impress them in some way. In the end, this was, I think, about a year ago or so, I just decided, or maybe 2 years, I just decided the door is closed. Because, and this goes for any relationship, but especially friendships, I think of as the first thing, is that you can't be doing 99% of the work all the time. Like, it does not work that way. Like, if your friend is having an off day, maybe you do more work that day. If you have an off day, maybe they do more. But if the relationship is you constantly working or fighting for it, and the other person is just there, no. So basically I closed the door. I heard from him, I think, once. He wrote me on Skype when COVID started to see if I was safe. I never answered because I know he didn't care to know. He probably wanted to know if he could inherit something from me, who knows. But yeah, I asked you guys on Twitter if you wanted to hear about this. I don't know if it's gonna end up being tedious for you guys because it's not like a particularly happy story. I mean, I guess the rain now makes a lot of sense, but that's the story of someone who ain't shit, basically. He knows about my channel, so if you see this, I'm not sorry. You guys can let me know if you're comfortable, if you've had similar experiences. I know a lot of people on Twitter mentioned that they relate in some aspect. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.